If you've ever thought, I can't build because I don't code, I'm proof that excuse is dead. I'm learning Claude Code from scratch, live, right now. What up everyone, it's Doobie. Quick context, if you're new here, I have zero coding experience, like genuinely none. 10 days ago, I started a series called Vibe Coding until I hit 100K, and we're currently on day 10. And here's what this challenge has taught me so far. The biggest advantage isn't actually talent, it's tooling. If you choose the right tools and you learn how to communicate with them properly, you can move ridiculously fast, even as a total beginner. So today we're starting a new mini-series, Learning Claude Code with me. Anthropic just dropped their new learning course, and honestly, what better time than now to learn the fundamentals properly in public together. The plan is simple. I'm going to go through the official Anthropic course live, pause constantly, explain what I'm learning in plain English, and then we'll apply it immediately. Prompting, workflow, best practices, all of it. No pretending, I know what I'm doing. You'll see the real process, the mistakes, the fixes, and the learnings. And if you're following along, tell me in the comments, what are you building and what's your current level, beginner or dev? All right, let's get into it. So Anthropic, as you can see, has just launched their Anthropic Academy, and we're gonna go through everything. So let's start with Claude 101. Again, I'm a complete beginner, I know nothing. So let's go. You can see here, they've got like all the different options, and it's looking like we're just gonna go through one of these one by one, and let's do it. Estimated time, 15 minutes. Learning objectives. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to explain what Claude is and the principles that guide its design. Describe Claude's core capabilities and how it differs from a simple chatbot. Identify the different ways to access Claude, web, desktop, and mobile. This video introduces Claude as more than a chatbot. It's an AI assistant designed to be your thinking partner. You'll learn what makes Claude different from other AI tools and how it can help with a wide variety of work tasks. All right, let's watch it, guys.
You had an idea. It started yesterday with a glimmer. What was it? Right. Claude remembered it. Your idea was hungry. Hungry for answers and connections. Claude helped you look, reading alongside you. Turn this into what? A deck. Spreadsheets. Documents. The tedious parts handled. Your idea stopped being just words and slides. It became entries, updates, actions, real things in real places. You kept going. You left your desk. Your idea followed into your phone. Calendar for when, maps for where, reminders for later. By evening, it was done. The idea was always yours. With Claude as your thinking partner, you made it real.
Very cool. Good little introduction there. So key takeaways. Claude is built to be helpful, harmless, and honest. At a high level, Claude is guided by principles that help it avoid toxic or discriminatory outputs, avoid helping humans engage in illegal or unethical activities. Claude is more than a chatbot. Claude is capable of a wide range of conversational and text processing tasks while maintaining a high degree of reliability and predictability, including summarization, search, creative, and collaborative writing, Q&A, coding, and more. Think of Claude as a thought partner who can help you tackle complex problems and work through challenging situations, not just answer simple questions. Claude is designed to be steerable and collaborative. Claude can take direction on personality, tone, and behavior, and early customers report that Claude is much less likely to produce harmful outputs. You can access Claude wherever you work. Claude apps are available to all plan types, free, pro, max, team, and enterprise. Understand Claude's capabilities. Writing and content creation. Claude can collaborate with you on social media posts, professional emails, and complex reports because Claude is trained to take direction on personality and tone. Research and analysis. Claude helps you explore research angles, compile findings, and analyze data to surface meaningful insights. You can upload documents and Claude will help you make sense of complex information. This is cool. This is enabled by Claude's large context window, which can ingest 200K plus tokens, about 500 pages of text or more. Wow. Allowing Claude to consider extensive materials in a single conversation. Coding assistance. Claude Opus 4.5 is our most powerful model yet and the best coding model in the world. That's a big statement. This strong performance on real-world coding tasks means Claude can help you write, debug, and explain code across multiple programming languages. Problem solving and reasoning. Claude handles complex cognitive tasks, mathematical problems, strategic analysis, and research. Claude Opus 4.5 and Sonnet 4.5 are hybrid models of offering two modes, near instant responses and extended thinking for deeper reasoning. Extended thinking allows Claude to work through problems step by step, making it well suited for tasks that require careful analysis. Learning new things, whether you're learning a new skill, exploring unfamiliar domains, or working through complex challenges, Claude can adapt to your learning style and pace. Learning mode is a new Claude experience that guides your reasoning process rather than providing answers, helping develop critical thinking skills. Get inspired on ways to use Claude in your specific function by exploring our use case gallery on claude.com. Might have to check that out later. Ways to access Claude. You got Claude.ai, Claude Code, Claude and Slack, Claude for Excel. So I can just click this and it takes me there. All right, cool. Good to know. So Claude AI is the associated mobile and desktop apps are the primary way most people interact with Claude. Here you can ask questions, brainstorm ideas, create and edit docs, and a lot more. Claude AI is ideal for conversations, writing assistance, research analysis, and creating files. This is our focus in this course. Okay, cool. So Claude Code is an agentic coding tool that is designed for developers but can be used for all kinds of file manipulation on your desktop. Claude Code can directly edit files, run commands, and create commits. Claude and Slack brings Claude directly into your team's communication tool. Claude for Excel lets you work directly with Claude in a sidebar in Microsoft Excel. This course will focus primarily on Claude.ai, but you can also check out Claude Code in action for more information on using Claude in development workflows. Lesson reflection. What tasks in your current work might benefit from having Claude as a thinking partner? In the next lesson, you'll learn how to navigate Claude interface, start your first conversation, and understand the basics of Claude response. Claude responds to your messages. Interesting. Well, we're kind of here for Claude Code. So maybe we can just skip ahead to Claude Code in action. Let's do it. I feel like that was a nice little introduction, but we're here for the meat and potatoes. Claude Code in action. Practical walkthrough of using Claude Code to accelerate your development workflow. All right, let's enroll in the course. About this course. This course covers Claude Code, a command line AI assistant that uses language models to perform development tasks. You'll learn how Claude Code reads files, executes commands, and modifies code through its tool system, along with techniques for managing context, creating custom workflows, extending Claude Code with hooks, and integrating with external services. By the end of this course, you'll be able to use Claude Code's core tools for file manipulation, command execution, and code analysis. Perfect. That's what we're after, right? Manage context effectively using init claude.md files and @mentions, control conversation flow with a variety of hotkeys and commands, enable plan mode and thinking mode for complex tasks requiring deep analysis, create custom commands for automating repetitive development workflows, extend Claude Code with MCP servers to add browser automation and other capabilities. Now look, this is a live learning session, so we're just gonna go ahead and figure out what MCP means because, hey, I keep hearing this thing and I know it's something to do with context, but I don't quite know what. So MCP is an acronym with several meanings depending on the context. The most prominent meaning in technology is Model Context Protocol, but it can also refer to the is an open standard that allows AI systems such as large language models and AI agents to connect with external data sources, tools, and applications. All right, cool. Set up GitHub integration. I definitely need to learn that for automated PR reviews and issue handling. Write hooks to add additional behavior into Claude Code. Prerequisites. Basic familiarity with command line. There was a little intro video. Can we see that intro video or? All right, let's do it. 0 of 21 lessons completed. Start.
Hello and welcome. My name is Stephen Greider, and I'm a member of technical staff at Anthropic. In this course, we're going to get you up to speed with Claude Code. And before we get into anything too technical, I want to give you a quick overview on what we'll be learning. This course is organized into 4 sections. We're going to first spend some time to understand exactly what a coding assistant is.
Cool.
We'll then take a look at Claude Code itself and understand what makes it stand out among all the different coding assistants on the market.
Okay.
Once we've established that, we'll walk through the use of Claude Code on a typical project and get some hands-on experience. Finally, we'll wrap things up by seeing how you can get the most out of Claude Code on your own projects.
Perfect. Love it. Great. Next. Is the sound all right for everyone, by the way?
In this video, we're going to get a better understanding of what a coding assistant is. Yes, a coding assistant is a tool that writes code, but I want to give you a deeper understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. You see, by understanding what a coding assistant really does and how it works, you'll have a greater appreciation of what makes a truly amazing assistant to complement your team. Here's one way that you can picture what a coding assistant is doing. An assistant is first given a task. In this case, maybe the assistant needs to fix a bug based upon some kind of error message. This task is passed off internally to a language model, which needs to figure out how to solve the issue. Now, different language models solve problems in very different styles, depending upon the complexity of the task, but in many cases, they work very much like how a human would work. It first might need to gather context by understanding what the error is referring to, what area in the codebase is throwing the error, and what files seem to be relevant. Once it has gathered that information, it then needs to formulate a plan on how it will actually accomplish the task. In this case, it might decide to change some code and then run or write a test to verify that the issue is actually fixed. Finally, it will take an action. In this case, that might be updating a file and running the tests. Now, I want to give you some more information on this entire process. In particular, I'd like you to notice that the first and last steps here require the coding assistant to actually do something. In other words, to actually gather information from the outside world or affect the outside world in some way. For example, to gather context, the assistant needs to maybe read a file or fetch some documentation online. And for taking an action, the assistant might need to actually run a command or edit a file. Now, having a language model actually do these things is a little bit trickier than it actually sounds. Let me help you understand why that is. Let's imagine that we are interacting with a language model directly, so it's not running inside of any coding assistant or anything like that. Let's then imagine that we ask this language model directly what code is written.
All right, hang on a second. So this is me. What code is written in the main.go file? Language model running outside of any coding system.
Inside the main.go file. Language models running outside the context of any coding assistant or similar tool do not inherently have the ability to, say, read a file or write a command or anything like that. Language models take in content like text and they return text. That's it. That's the entire extent of their capabilities. And this is true of all language models. So if
Okay.
you were to send some text into a plain language model asking it to read a file, it would most likely respond by saying that it doesn't have the ability to read any files. So let me show you what coding assistants and many, many other tools out
So I actually want to add this in so I can actually do my notes. Alongside like this. Alright. Claude Code.
out there do to actually allow a language model to quote unquote read a file. So here's what happens. Whenever you send a request off to your coding assistant, the coding assistant behind the scenes is going to automatically append a lot of text into your request. In this particular case, we can imagine that the coding assistant is going to add on some text that says something like, if you, language model, want to read a file, respond with this very carefully formatted message. For example, maybe something like read file, and then the name of a file to read. So in this case, the language model would hopefully realize that in order to answer our question, it needs to respond by reading that file. So it might respond with read file, main.go. Now the coding assistant would be in charge of receiving this very carefully formatted message and realizing that the language model wants to take some kind of action by reading a file. So the coding assistant would then be responsible for actually reading the file and sending the contents of that file back into the language model. Now that the language model has received the actual contents of that file, it can write a final response that gets sent back to us, in which it might say, well, I read this file and it contains some amount of code or whatever else, whatever's inside that file. This entire system of giving a language model these extra little instructions, asking it to respond in a very well-formatted or carefully formatted way, is referred to as tool use. So tools are used to give models extra capabilities.
Okay.
The model is responsible for responding in a very particular way, and then something like our coding assistant would be responsible for actually doing whatever was promised. So actually reading a file or writing a file or whatever else. Again, this is how every single language model out there works. They all work with this idea of tool use. Now here's the critical part to understand. The Claude series of models, so Opus, Sonnet, and Haiku, are particularly strong at understanding what tools do when they're called, and actually using them to effectively complete tasks, and using them in really interesting combinations to complete more advanced or complex tasks. Claude's strong tool use is the absolute core strength of Claude Code as a coding assistant. And here's why. First, as I just mentioned, with better tool use, Claude can handle more complex tasks. Second, Claude Code itself is extensible, so it's really easy to add in new tools to Claude Code, and Claude will happily make use of those tools. This is especially important for continued relevance, given the fast changes that we're seeing in the world of development. In other words, Claude Code is an assistant that will change with you in the years to come. And finally, with improved tool use, you often get better security, because Claude can effectively search your codebase to find relevant code without relying upon indexing, which often relies upon sending your entire codebase to outside servers. Let's do a quick review on what we learned inside this video around what a coding assistant really is. So remember, coding assistants use language models internally to complete different tasks. These language models, they need to know how to use tools to work on the vast majority of tasks that they are given. Tools are used to read files, write files, run commands, and essentially everything else that doesn't just involve generating some text. Not all language models make use of tools at the same level, and this has a big impact on the overall efficiency of a coding assistant.
Okay, that last bit, I just
In this
wanted
video, we're going to
jot down.
And this has a big impact.
So not all LLMs use tools the same way. Claude is especially strong at using tools effectively and efficiently. I mean, I'm already learning how large language models work, and coding IDEs. So how coding assistants work. When you give a coding assistant a task, like fixing a bug based on an error message, it follows a process similar to how a human developer would approach the problem. Gather context. Understand what the error refers to, which part of the code base is affected, and what files are relevant. Formulate a plan, deciding how to solve the issue, such as changing code and running tests to verify the fix. Take action, actually implementing the solution by updating files and running commands. The key insight here is that the first and last steps require the assistant to interact with the outside world, reading files, fetching documentation, running commands, or editing code. The tool use challenge. Here's where things get interesting. Language models by themselves can only process text and return text. They can't actually read files or run commands. If you ask a standalone language model to read a file, it will tell you it doesn't have that capability. So how does coding assistants solve this problem? They use a clever system called tool use. How tool use works. When you send a request to a coding assistant, it automatically adds instructions to your message that teach the language model how to request actions. For example, it might add text like, if you want to read a file, respond with read file name of file. Here's the complete flow. You ask, what code is written in the main.go file? The coding assistant adds tool instructions to your request. The language model responds, read file.main.go. The coding assistant reads the actual file and sends its contents back to the model. The language model provides a final answer based on the file contents. This system allows language models to effectively read files, write code, and run commands, even though they're really just generating carefully formatted text responses. Man, does anyone else feel like when you're reading it, you understand it better? Like when the guy was talking in the video, it was kind of like a bit complicated, but when you read it, it kind of sinks and it hits better. I don't know, anyone else feel that? Why Claude's tool use matters. Kind of like this, so I'm going to copy it, put it here. Because I feel like this is important. Why Claude's tool use matters. Not all language models are equally good at using tools. The Claude series of models, Opus, Sonnet, and Haiku, are particularly strong at understanding what tools do and using them effectively to complete complex tasks. Okay, this strength in tool use provides several key benefits for Claude Code. Benefits of strong tool use. Tackles harder tasks. Claude can combine different tools to handle complex work and will use tools it hasn't seen before. Extensible platform. You can easily add new tools to Claude Code and Claude will adapt to use them as your workflow evolves. Better security. Claude Code can navigate code bases without requiring indexing, which often means not sending your entire code base to external servers. Key takeaways. Understanding coding assistants come down to a few essential points. Coding assistants use language models to complete different tasks. Language models need tools to handle most real-world programming tasks. Not all language models use tools with the same skill level. Claude's strong tool use enables better security, customization, and longevity in Claude Code. This tool capability is what transforms a single text generating model into a powerful coding assistant that can read your files, understand your code base, and make meaningful changes to your project. Okay, that was very interesting. Are we all following along so far? Yeah, we are? All right, cool. Next. All right, Claude Code in action. Claude Code comes with a comprehensive set. Claude Code comes with a comprehensive set of built-in tools that handle common development tasks like reading files, writing code, running commands, and managing directories. But what makes Claude Code truly powerful is how intelligently it combines these tools to tackle complex multi-step problems.
Some pretty big claims by saying that Claude was an expert at making use of tools. and that Claude Code was easily extensible. Naturally, you might be a little skeptical, so I'd like to give you a few quick demonstrations. On this table are the default tools that are available in Claude Code. It has all the abilities you would expect, like reading files, writing files, running commands, and so on. I'm going to show you a couple of tasks completed using Claude Code, and in each case, it will use this set of tools in rather intelligent ways. And in at least one task, I'll even give Claude an additional new set of tools to make use of. Not only will this process give you a good idea of what Claude Code can do right out of the box, but hopefully you will also see how easily you can extend Claude Code with more functionality. Here's my first task for Claude Code. I'm going to ask it to find and optimize performance issues in the Chalk library. In case you're not familiar with it, Chalk is a JavaScript package. Here's the documentation for it. Now this is a very small library that has one very simple purpose. All it does is print out text in nicely formatted colors, so like exactly as you see in this example screenshot right here. So you can give the text colors or backgrounds and formatting, all that kind of stuff. Now this might sound like a really simple and silly package, but here's the thing. It turns out this is actually the 5th most downloaded package in the entire JavaScript ecosystem. Last week in particular, it had 429 million downloads.
Damn.
So this package is used far and wide, to put it simply. If I could find any way to optimize anything inside this
Yo, can I just say it has 23.1 billion downloads? Like, who is downloading this over and over again?
package, well, it would probably be worth the effort. So I'm going to ask Claude to run the benchmarks, identify the worst performing cases, use some profiling tools to figure out why those cases are running so slowly, and then fix them. We'll then see that Claude is going to use a wide variety of different tools to intelligently tackle this problem. It'll form up a to-do list to track its progress, execute commands to run the benchmarks, write a file to better zoom in on one particular case, use a CPU profiler to understand why that case is running so slowly, and then implement some improvements. By the end, we'll get a 3.9 times improvement in throughput in one particular operation around this library. Here's another example of how well Claude can string together different tool calls to complete a rather complex task. I'm going to give it a data set inside of a CSV file. All the data inside of here contains information about different users of a video streaming platform. And I'm going to ask it to just do a general analysis, maybe identify some causes of churn on the platform. And I want all this analysis to be done inside of a Jupyter notebook. Here's my data set. I'm then going to ask Claude to run the analysis, and let's see how it does. This is a great example of where effective tool use is really important. You see, it's not really enough that Claude just writes code into a notebook. Claude can also execute code in different cells and view the results of those executions. That means that Claude can take some initial look at the data in the notebook and then customize each successive cell to hone in on some particular details. Next up, I'd like to show you an example of a task where I extend Claude Code's capabilities by giving it access to a new set of tools. I built a small app that will generate UI components based upon some description entered on the left side of the screen. The generated component is then displayed on the right side. Now, the app can generate good-looking components quite easily, but the chat interface on the left and the header at the top are not looking so nice. So I'm going to use Claude Code to improve the styling. If I just asked it to fix the styling in the chat interface in the header, it would likely do a fine job. But remember, my goal here is to show you how easy it is to add additional functionality to Claude Code. So along with this styling task, I'm going to also give Claude Code access to a new set of tools provided by something called the Playwright MCP server, which I'll tell you more about later on. These tools allow Claude to directly open and control a browser. So here's what that process looks like in action. I'm going to ask Claude to improve the styling of my app and make use of a browser to do so. It'll then open a browser on the right-hand side of the screen, navigate to my app, it'll take a screenshot to view the current styling, and then update the styling. We could even ask Claude to take another screenshot of the page when it was complete and iterate on the design a couple of times to really get a nice design that really pops. And before long, we've got something that actually looks pretty reasonable. There's one last set of demonstrations that I'd like to give you. Remember what I mentioned a moment ago. Claude's ability to utilize tools so well is what will allow Claude Code to grow with you and your team in the future. Let me show you an example of that right away. Claude Code has a very close integration with GitHub. You can set up Claude Code to run inside of a GitHub action, where it will be executed automatically based upon certain events, like creating a pull request or when directly mentioned inside of an issue. When Claude Code runs on GitHub, it not only gets to view and run your code, but it also gets to access a new set of tools for interacting with GitHub, like the ability to create comments or create commits or pull requests and so on. You can use this integration to automatically review pull requests. Let me show you an example. Let me first set up a little scenario for you. Let's imagine that we are building out some infrastructure on AWS, and all of our infrastructure is defined inside of a set of Terraform files, which are committed and stored on GitHub. Because all of our infrastructure is defined inside of Terraform files, Claude Code has a really good idea of how information is flowing through our infrastructure. Now let's imagine that in this app, I have a DynamoDB table. And if you're not familiar with those, it's kind of like a normal database table. Inside there, I'm storing some different information about users, including maybe plans viewed and a registration date. And for maybe some reason, we want to share just that plans viewed and registration date information with some internal marketing team, but also some external marketing team as well. So some other company has access to the data that we are writing in this bucket. So it's really important for us to always be aware of what information is being written into that bucket over time. Nightly, we might have a Lambda function, pull out all the different users that have been added into that table, and then extract just plans viewed and the registration date, and store that in the S3 bucket so these two marketing teams can access that information. Now let's imagine that months later on, the internal marketing team asks us to also store the email inside of this S3 bucket as well. So we might go into the Lambda function and add in just one single line of code that takes the user's email and stores it inside the bucket. And because this is months later on, we might have completely forgotten that this S3 bucket is shared with an external marketing partner. So now at this point in time, we are putting personally identifiable information into this bucket, which is accessible by a separate company. This is a big no-no, definitely something we would not want to do. But at the same time, this is an error that does occur, and it's kind of hard to catch if we don't have a good idea of exactly what's going on with this S3 bucket. Well, it turns out that Claude Code can catch this kind of scenario inside of a pull request quite easily, specifically because all of our infrastructure is defined inside of those Terraform files. So here's a quick example. I built that project that I just showed you in that diagram. I created a pull request to add in the user's email inside of the Lambda function. So the only line of code that I changed was that right there. I'm saying that for every user, I want to get their email and add that into the bucket as well. Now, Claude Code has an excellent idea of my infrastructure. So it was able, inside of an automated review, as we're seeing right here, to take a look at all the changes I made inside this pull request. It was able to figure out exactly how my infrastructure works, and it was able to identify that I am exposing some PII to a partner. So it has listed out the data flow right here, the exact steps that occur, and goes into great detail on how this bucket is shared with an external partner. Catching issues like this during development instead of after we deploy this change is an amazing benefit to using Claude Code's integration on GitHub.
Very cool.
I'm going to go into a lot of detail later on and show you exactly how to set up a flow exactly like this. I think that we've now got a good idea of what Claude Code can do thanks to its excellent ability to make use of tools. Remember, you really want to think of Claude Code as a flexible assistant that can be customized, grow, and change over time to meet the needs of your team.
Sweet. Time to get Claude Code set up locally. Full setup direction can be found here. In short, you need to do the following: install Claude Code, after installation, run Claude at your terminal. The first time you run this command, you will be prompted to authenticate. If you're making use of AWS Bedrock or Google Cloud Vertex, there is some additional setup. Now, does Claude Code have an app? I thought I remember seeing it. No. Let's go here. Before you begin, a terminal command prompt, a code project to work with, store Claude Code, Mac OS. cool. Let's open up terminal. Claude AI. Okay, I'm in. Wait. Slash login. No files at Claude. Slash login. Bruh. Use. When you start an interact session with Claude command, you will need to log in. Okay. When you first authenticate Claude Code with your Claude Code account, a workspace called Claude Code is automatically created for you. This workspace provides centralized cost tracking and management for Claude Code usage in your organization. You can have both account types under the same email address. If you need to log again or switch accounts, use the login command with Claude Code. Alright. Slash login. Wait, let me ask. Man, already getting stuck. That's how you know that you're a noob. Let's open chat. Actually, let's ask Claude. Just downloaded Claude Code through my Mac terminal. How to start first session and log in using account. Simply open your terminal and type Claude. When you run Claude for the first time, you'll be prompted to log in. You can also manually trigger the login process by running Let me send this. This is what I get when when hitting command. I see the issue. The Claude command isn't in your path yet. The installer told you exactly what to do. You need to add local bin to your path. Run this command. Export path. Native installation exists, but local bin is not in your path. Run. If that still doesn't work, you might be using ZH instead of bash, which is the default on your Macs. In that case, run. Okay. I just pressed all these and hit enter. Didn't work. Let's see. Just pasted all options, hit enter, and nothing happened. Now you need to run a new terminal window for the changes to take effect. The path, Claude, do this. Alright, let's see. they didn't work. Maybe I should send the whole thing. Opened new terminal and ran Claude. Nothing happened. I see the issue. You're using bash, but your default shell is ZH as shown in the terminal message. The path was added to ZH, but you're running bash. Try this. Then run Claude. We'll switch to ZH permanently and make this work going forward. Yo, we're in. All right. Welcome to Claude Code. Let's get started. Choose the text style that looks best with your terminal. Okay. Light, dark, light, dark, light. I kind of like dark mode. Light mode's cool as well. Maybe let's go light. Claude account with subscription. I think that's what we are at. So if we were to Claude account with subscription. Wait. What's this? You trying to tell me that I just did all that when there's an app? Oh my god. Let me see. Now, why on earth is that not in? Is it because it's not Claude Code? It's Claude.ai. Let's see. So IDE. Okay, so these are their promoted IDEs. Web and iOS. You can use it in the browser, or in the terminal, or in VS Code JetBrains. Use Claude Code where you work. Web and iOS. Delegate task Claude from your browser or the Claude iOS app. Great for bug fixes. Okay, so let's see. I want to finish this as well though, so let's enter. Interesting. Did not know that. Is it going to give me the same prompt? No, it's not. Continue. So, upgrade to connect your tools to Claude Code. Alright, well, we've got the iOS app now. But while we're at it, let's go ahead and upgrade. Okay. Alright, let's do this. Get Pro. So essentially what we're doing here, after a little bit of confusion, is we have found two different ways to get Claude on our device, either through an IDE, which is supported by VS Code, or through an iOS app, which you can download, or through the terminal. Now, we've essentially just done the terminal. You're all set for Claude Code. You can now close this window. Close. Login successful. Please enter to continue. Okay, it worked. Sweet. Press enter to continue. Claude can make mistakes. You should always review Claude's responses, especially when running code. Due to prompt injection risks, only use it with code you trust. Use Claude Code's terminal setup. No. Yep. Yes, use recommended settings. Yes, continue. Okay. Tips for getting started. Run/init to create a claude.md file with the instructions for Claude. Note you have launched Claude in your home directory. For the best experience, launch it. Launch it. Okay. It's just going to cut out there. Yeah, sweet. All right, cool. Well, we got it set up here. Try fix check. Type check errors. Fix type check errors. I hope you fix type check errors. Let me first explore the project to understand what types of project this is and then run the type checker. All right, now we've just upgraded, so let's see if this works. I'm assuming if we open and close this again, it should work fine. So let's quit. All right, we've just quit Claude Code. All right, now we're back. Connect your tools to Claude. Sweet. All right, so we have the terminal Claude set up on the right, and we've also installed the iOS app on the left. Okay. Cool. Into smaller, manageable steps. Bad prompt. Help me with a presentation. Good prompt. I need help creating a 10-slide presentation for our quarterly sales meeting. The presentation should cover our Q2 sales performance, top selling products, and sales targets for Q3. Please provide an outline with key points for each slide. Why it's better? The good prompt provides specific details about the task, including the number of slides, the purpose of the presentation, and the key topics to be covered. Okay. And then it's just going to keep giving us a bunch of good examples. Now, I feel like we can kind of skip all of that because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty confident in my prompting ability. So, cool. All right, exit that. Now let's go back to, it seems to have a code session here. So, welcome to Claude Code, your agentic coding partner that works directly in your code base, now with a simple visual interface. Install, run. I've already done that, man. Yeah, that's right. That's what I thought. All right, sweet. So, we've got all this set up. Now, this is exactly where we're up to for the next part of the lesson. I think it was this one. All right. Hey, so for anyone following right now and you want to download Claude Code, I would actually recommend getting the iOS device instead of through the terminal, especially if you're like me and you don't know much coding experience. Now, it doesn't seem overly advertised through their course, but you know, I just did it just then. So yeah, highly recommend. All right. Next, working with Claude Code is more interesting if you have a project to work with. I put together a small project to explore with Claude Code. It is the same UI generation app shown in a previous video. Note, you don't have to run this project. You can always follow along with the remainder of the course with your own code base if you wish. Setup. This project requires a small amount of setup. Ensure you have Node.js installed locally. Link to installation directions. All right. Well, let's see if we've got Node.js. Let's go ahead and do this. Boom. I think I might have this installed, but honestly not sure. Continue, agree, install. Impure package has been installed. All right, let's move to bin. We're moving the installer into the bin for anyone wondering, not what we've just installed. Okay, so now we've done that. Download the zip file called Ujin, attach to this lecture and extract it. In the project directory, run npm run setup to install dependencies and set up a local SQLite database. Optional. This project uses Claude through the Anthropic API to generate UI components. If you want to fully test out the app, you will need to provide an API key to access the Anthropic API. This is optional. If no API key is provided, the app will still generate some static fake code. Here's how you can set the API key. I don't think we need the API key, so let's see. Now, if I was to open this up, let's bring this to the desktop here. Now, it has told me to, in the project directory, run npm run setup. Okay. Let's go ahead. Now, I'm assuming directory is going to be the terminal, and I have assumed correctly. Not the terminal. Allow, always allow for project, allow. Now, what do you guys recommend? Do you guys recommend using Claude Code in a terminal or on a iOS device, kind of like how I am right now? The setup completed successfully. Here's what was done. Okay, so we did that. Now, start the project by running npm run dev. Shimmying. Perfect. The development server is now running. Okay. So if we have a look here, we have this generator. I want to create a button that says submit for a form. Boom. Cool. Works. Now let's get rid of all this. So we've just done that. Now let's go next. Adding context.
I've got my code editor open.
When working with Claude on coding projects, context management is crucial. Your project might have dozens or hundreds of files, but Claude only needs the right information to help you effectively. Too much irrelevant context actually decreases Claude's performance, so learning to guide it toward relevant file documentation is essential.
Open inside that small project, I'm going to start up the development server with a npm run dev. And when I run that, I'm going to be able to navigate to localhost 3000 inside my browser,
Which we
and
have
see
here.
the application running. So here it is right here. We are going to use Claude Code to do a little bit of work on this project. But first, there's something really critical I want you to understand around using Claude Code. Specifically, I want you to walk away from this course with a strong understanding of context management. You see, inside of a typical project, there might be dozens or hundreds of files, each with a tremendous amount of information. Whenever
Okay.
we ask Claude Code a question or give it a task, there is some ideal amount of information that Claude needs, just enough to help it understand how to answer your question or complete your task. As soon as we start adding in additional information that's not relevant, Claude Code's effectiveness will start to decrease. So it is really important for us to help guide Claude towards relevant files or documentation inside of our project.
Makes sense?
Claude Code can certainly work without any handholding, but you'll get the best results if you provide just a little bit of guidance. So for the remainder of this video, I'm going to give you a bunch of different tips on how to give Claude the best context possible. To get started, inside my editor, I've opened up my terminal, and I'm going to start Claude Code up by running the Claude command. Whenever you run Claude Code in a project for the first time, I highly recommend running the /init command. This gets Claude to take a deep look at your entire codebase. It'll figure out the purpose.
All right, let's go ahead and do that. /init. Now, was that necessary or? Okay. Now, when did this iOS app come out? Because I feel like everyone only ever talks about the terminal. When did the Claude iOS app release? Oh, it's been out for ages. Why does everyone always talk about using Claude through the terminal? Like, if the iOS app is right there, it doesn't really make sense, does it? I'll analyze the code base to create a comprehensive claude.md file. So in here, cool. Used 35 tools. Fibbity gibbeting. Can't believe I laughed at that. Wrangling. Now I'll create the claude.md file with the essential information. So I'm assuming that is completed. Okay. Sweet.
Purpose of the project, the general architecture, relevant commands, critical files, and so on. After this search, it'll summarize its findings and place them into a file called claude.md. When Claude tries to create this file, it will ask for permission. You can either hit.
Okay, so it's done so right here. This file provides guidance to Claude Code when working with code in this repository. UIGen is an AI-powered React component generator with a preview. Users describe components in natural language and receive interactive, editable components in real time. The app uses a virtual file system. No disk writes with full persistence for authenticated users. Now, this is really useful information because when I'm currently using Replit and I hate it. So now when I make the shift, I know that when looking at the file for the first time, I need to do /init. Development command, setup test, blah, blah, blah. This document focus on the big picture. All right, cool. And it's just gone ahead and done it. Fantastic. Love it.
Or hit enter to accept, or if you don't want to have to grant permission to every file write request, you can also press Shift Tab, which allows Claude Code to freely write files in your project. I would encourage you to open up the Claude MD file that was generated and take a look at its contents. As I mentioned, the contents of this file are included in every request that we make off to Claude. This file really has two different purposes. First, it helps Claude better understand your codebase so it can find relevant code more quickly. And second, it serves as a location where you can give Claude some general guidance. Just so you know, there are multiple Claude MD files that Claude Code will make use of. There's a project level, a local level, and a machine level. The project level is what we just generated by running the /init command. We are generally going to commit this file to source control, like Git. We're going to share this file with other engineers, and it's going to have some project-specific directions that we want to hand off to Claude. Optionally, we can also create a Claude local MD file. This file is not going to be committed, and you're generally not going to share with any other engineers. Inside this file, you might put in some personal instructions that you want Claude to follow just for you. Finally, you can have a global Claude MD file on your machine. This file will contain instructions that will be applied to all projects that you run locally. Now, I keep on mentioning giving Claude special or custom instructions. So let me show you an example of that. Let's imagine that Claude is using comments way too often in the code that it writes. We can address this by updating our Claude MD file. We can either manually modify the file, or a little bit of a shortcut is inside of Claude Code, we could put in a £. This puts us in memory mode. This allows us to edit one of our Claude MD files intelligently. So we can...
Hang on a second. Let's go back a smidge.
Updating our Claude MD file. We can either manually modify the file, or a little bit of a shortcut is inside of Claude Code, we could put in a £. This puts us in memory mode. But is inside of Claude Code, we could put in a £. This puts us in memory mode. This allows us to edit one of our Claude...
£? What the hell is that?
Manually modify the file, or a little bit of a shortcut is inside of Claude Code, we could put in a £. This puts us in memory mode. This allows us to edit one of our Claude MD files intelligently. So we can put in a request like don't write comments so often. I'll then specify that I want to add this instruction to the project.
He said £. Keyboard. The hell is a £? Shift 3 plus 3 on a UK. Option plus 3 on a Mac. Okay, we've done that. Now I feel like I've done something wrong.
Project Claude MD file.
A £.
Claude's then going to merge this instruction into that file intelligently.
Use comments sparingly, only comment. But could I not just say use comments only comment complex codes? Use comments sparingly, only comment complex codes. So if I was to open this, and then in brackets just be like add to dot Claude dot MD, that would have the same effect, no?
If I then open the file up and do a search, I'll see that in fact, yes, it did that file intelligently. If I then open the file up and do a search, I'll see that in fact, yes, it did add in that new instruction. Now that we've
All right, let's see if they added that. Perfect. Use comments sparingly. It's added that there. Okay, sweet, cool. So this file is basically the rules that Claude follows when working on this project specifically. Yes? No? Yes.
Now that we've created our Claude MD file, I want to give you a better understanding of how to pull in specific context into a conversation. Let's imagine that we want to better understand how the authentication system in this project works. We could just ask Claude to tell us about it, in which case it would search over our codebase and find files relevant to the authentication system. That would definitely work, but it would just take some amount of time.
Okay.
Alternatively, if we already know some files that are relevant for the authentication system, we could mention them using the @ character. When we
How does the auth system work at? Okay. Let's try this. How does the auth system work at?
mention a file, it will be automatically.
At which file did you write?
We could mention them using the @ character. When we mention a file, it will be automatic.
At auth dialog.tsd dialog.tsx. How does the auth system work?
Automatically included inside of a request off to Claude. This is an excellent technique for pointing Claude in a specific
Oh, he mentioned a
direction.
few.
You can use the same syntax to also mention.
Let's see. I'll examine the auth dialog component to explain how the authentication system works. Read auth dialog. Read sign-in form. Oh, dude. Claude. This must be like
Files inside
an
of
older
Claude.
version of Claude that he uses, because this Claude is just doing everything. Tool use error. File does not exist.
Let me show you an example of why that is really useful.
Okay, so that worked.
For pointing Claude in a
File mentioned with @ plus path to file. Scroll through the list. Select a file.
specific direction, you can use the same syntax to also mention files inside of Claude MD. Let me show you an example of why that is really useful. Inside of the Prisma folder of this project, there's a file called schema.prisma. This file
Okay.
contains a complete definition of all the different tables and types of records that exist inside the SQLite database that is used to store information inside this project. Because this information is so important and relevant to so many aspects of this project, I might decide to mention this file inside of my Claude MD file. Let me show you how I do that. First, I'll enter a pound to enter memory mode. I'll then mention that
So it's entering memory mode. So if I do option 3 to enter memory mode,
that schema file, and specifically tell Claude to reference that file anytime it needs to better understand the structure.
the database schema is defined in the Prisma file. Reference it anytime you need to understand the structure of data stored in the database. Okay. The database schema is defined in the @prisma/schema @prisma/schema .prisma file. Reference it anytime you need to understand the structure of data stored in the database. Reference it anytime you need to understand the structure of data within the database. Okay.
structure of data inside the database. Once the update is complete, I'm going to take a look at the Claude MD
I'll add this important note to the Claude MD file. Okay.
file and just verify that the note was added. When you
Sweet.
mention a file like this, its contents are automatically included inside of your request. So if I ask what attributes the user has,
Okay, let's try it. What ATTRS does a user have? Does a user have? Based on database schema, a user has the following attributes. Okay, sick. This is
Claude
cool.
can immediately answer without reading the schema file.
So far, so good. All right, cool. Now, when working with Claude on coding projects, context management is crucial. Yes, we learnt this. .init, yep. Claude Code. Okay, so adding custom instructions. You can customize how Claude behaves by adding instructions to your claude.md file. Makes sense. Referencing files in claude.md. You can also mention files directly in your claude.md file using the same @ syntax. This is particularly useful for files that are relevant to many aspects of your project. Okay, sweet. Next. So far, so good.
Let's try making a couple of changes to this project.
Let's
Along
do
the
it.
way, I'll show you some useful features around Claude Code. The first thing I'd like to do is move this placeholder text over here on the left-hand side down to the center of this panel. To help Claude understand exactly what content I want moved, I'm going to take a screenshot of that area right there, and then I'm going to paste it into Claude Code using Control V. Note that it's Control V and not.
Okay. Let's try that. Let's refresh this. Now, taking a screenshot of this. Can we go like this? So now I can use Claude while watching this video. Taking my screenshot.
And not Command V that you might be used to on macOS. Control V is used specifically to paste in a screenshot. I can then ask Claude to center that placeholder. After a little bit of searching, Claude is able to make the styling update. And then back inside the browser, yeah, looks great. Let me show you the next thing I would like to change in this app. I'm going to ask for a card component that displays.
So it should show up here. It's loading. I can see the issue. The empty state in message list has justified, but the scroll area wrapper might be affecting the vertical. Perfect. I've added a blah, blah, blah. All right, let's refresh. Now be vertically centered on the screen when there are no messages. It didn't work. It didn't work. It didn't work. Now, do I need to... Let me see.
Let me show you the next thing. After a little bit of searching, Claude is able to make the styling update. And then back inside the browser, yeah, looks great. Let me show you the.
Do I need to refresh? Let's ask Claude Code. Still showing at the top. Do I need to refresh or should it show automatically? Tried refreshing. Refreshing browser and nothing happened. Sussing, love that. Channeling, the change should be updated. The changes should update automatically with hot reload, but let me investigate the issue. The problem might be with how the scroll area component handles height. Boom, there you go. Fixed. Done. Wearing. Good, I've changed the empty state to use. Alright, perfect.
The next thing I would like to change in this app. I'm going to ask for a card component that displays a title and some description.
Create a card with a title and description.
The card is generated without any issue, but there is one awkward thing. On the left-hand side in the chat interface, there's string replace editor. That little panel right there is meant to indicate to the user that a file is being created. But right now it's using a very technical term, string.
True. Alright, let's try that. Static response. Okay. So does he take a screenshot of this? Or?
String replace editor for the tool that is being used behind the scenes. I would like to show a user a little bit more friendly text here and just tell the user that a file is being created and the name of the file. And of course, we should also handle cases where maybe this chatbot is editing a file or deleting a file and other stuff like that. To help guide Claude's attention, I'm going to once again take a screenshot of this so to understand.
Right.
It's exactly what I'm talking about. Then back over here, I'm going to paste that image in and ask Claude to replace that particular text. Text with some more user-friendly message. Now, this is a little bit of a tricky task that will require Claude to do a decent amount of research in this project to complete. Whenever you give Claude a harder task, there are two ways that you can easily boost Claude's intelligence. The first way is to enable plan mode. Plan mode is enabled by pressing Shift-Tab twice, or just once if you are already auto-accepting file edits. In plan mode, Claude will do much more research over the contents of your project, reading more files and coming up with a detailed plan on how to complete your task. After completing the plan, Claude will tell you exactly what it wants to do to complete your task. At that point, you can either accept this plan and Claude will implement it, or you can redirect Claude in some way. Maybe it missed some file or didn't consider some scenario. The second way in which we can boost Claude's intelligence is by enabling thinking. This turns on Claude's extended thinking feature, allowing it to reason more about a particular task. To enable thinking, there are a handful of different trigger phrases. Each one gives Claude a progressively larger token budget to think with. Given that this is a trickier task, I might ask Claude to ultra think about the best way to implement it. The last thing to understand is that planning and thinking can be used together. So in addition to this ultra think, I'm going to also turn on plan mode as well. And now I'm going to run this, and we'll see how well Claude can implement this feature.
Interesting.
Now, you might be wondering when you should use planning and when you should use thinking. Think of these two as handling breadth versus depth. Planning mode is useful when you have a task that requires a wide understanding of your codebase and requires looking at different areas. It's also useful when working on a task that requires several steps to complete. Thinking, on the other hand, is useful when you are focusing on a particular tricky bit of logic or troubleshooting a difficult bug. The second question you might have is whether you should just enable thinking and planning all the time. Well, you certainly can. Just keep in mind that planning and thinking consume additional tokens, so there is a cost associated with using them.
Interesting.
After a couple of minutes of work, it looks
So
like
if I
the feature is
do
complete.
tab,
So I'm going to go back over to my editor
is
and
that
test this
editing
out.
this?
So
No,
right
it's
away,
not.
you can see
I
that
have
we
to
get
do
some
tab
better status
here.
information here than what we had before. Users are now being told that a file is being created. And if I set
For anyone that didn't just see that, if you're using the iOS app and you want to get Claude to the planning mode, you go to CLI, which opens terminal, and then you do the Shift tab twice here to get planning mode. And then you can turn on thinking just through pressing tab. So yeah, hope that helps if you didn't catch that.
Send in a follow-up request, maybe to change the title. Hopefully now on the follow-up, we'll see something about editing that file. So there we go. So now we're editing the app.jsx file.
Cool.
I would say Claude definitely succeeded in implementing this feature.
Yep.
Now that we have made some changes to this project, we should probably commit our changes. Claude Code is a solid Git assistant. We can ask it to stage and commit our changes, and it will write a descriptive commit message for us.
Okay. Allow Claude to run Git, initial commit with UI improvements, add Claude.md documentation for future development. Okay. Course satisfaction survey. All right, what are we thinking, guys? I've actually got, how happy are you with this course so far? I'll say neutral, because it's left out the iOS Claude app, which I've had to kind of find myself and stumble upon while trying to download it through terminal and realizing it was too hard. So neutral. And I also go like, it's not really giving much of a tutorial for the Claude Apple app. It's just for the terminal. So I go neutral. On a scale of 1 to 5, how likely are you to recommend this course to a friend or colleague? Honestly, likely, because it is by the Anthropic team. It's legit. But hey, I feel like they're kind of giving me this survey a bit too early. Is there any feedback you'd like to provide based upon your experience with this course so far? Yes. When going to download Claude Code for my terminal on Mac, after digging further, I quickly realized there was a iOS app version. Now sometimes the tutorial does not match with the iOS app versus the terminal, and I'm finding out myself how to implement these changes. For example, to initiate planning mode, it did not mention that I had to hit CLI on the bottom right to make Shift plus Tab shortcut work for planning mode. Alright, hey, it's good to help, man. I want other people to have a better experience. Alright, next. Controlling context. When working with Claude,
show you a couple of different
when working with Claude on complex tasks, you often need to guide the conversation to keep it focused and productive. There are several techniques you can use to control the flow of your conversation with and help Claude stay on track. Interrupting Claude with escape. Sometimes Claude starts heading in the wrong direction or tries to tackle too much at once. You can press the escape key to stop Claude mid-response, allowing you to redirect the conversation. This is particularly useful when you want Claude to focus on one specific task instead of trying to handle multiple things simultaneously. For example, if you ask Claude to write tests for multiple functions and it starts creating a comprehensive plan, For all of them, you can interrupt and ask it to focus on just one function at a time. Okay.
Different techniques for controlling and directing the flow of conversation. Here's a basic example right away. I'm going to ask Claude to write tests for some functions written into a authentication file. Claude quickly comes up with a plan for authoring several different tests. However, I know that testing this file is a little tough, and I'd like Claude to only test one thing at a time. To interrupt Claude, I can press escape. This will stop Claude in its tracks, allowing me to
So I can
suggest a
interrupt it
different
by
path.
pressing this.
Combining escape along with memories is a really powerful way to fix errors that Claude makes repeatedly. Here's an example. I'm going to ask Claude to write tests for the same file again. This time
Interrupt.
around, it will attempt to read a test configuration file that doesn't actually exist. Now,
Okay.
this is an error that I've seen Claude make before.
Let's go back. What did he do?
Claude to write tests
Create session function.
for the same file again. This time around, it will attempt to read a test configuration file that doesn't actually exist. Now, this is an error that I've seen Claude make before on this project. So to stop this mistake from being repeated, I'll very quickly hit escape. I'll then use the pound shortcut to add in a memory about the correct name of this test config file. And
Add a memory with hashtag. So why is he saying pound this whole time when it's hashtag? That's the hashtag sign. Do people call the hashtag a pound? Like, dude, this guy... Yes, people, especially in North America, call the hashtag symbol the pound sign. Oh my god, that's annoying. Oh my god, holy smokes, man.
now I probably won't have to see this error again.
Alright, I was wondering why that wasn't working. So what did he say? Hashtag Vitess configures in Vitess. Okay.
Test config file.
So you can
And now
guide
I
it.
probably won't have to see this error again. Some of these conversation control shortcuts seem like they're just for convenience, but used correctly, they can really improve Claude's ability to work effectively and stay on task. So let me show you a more practical example. Inside the auth.ts file, there are 4 different functions, and I would like to get Claude to write tests for each of them one at a time. First starting on a function called create session. Claude will definitely attempt to write the tests, but as it is running them, it runs into an error and spends a little bit of time debugging it. It turns out there was a package that I forgot to install. Eventually the tests are completed and working, and it's time to start working on the next set of tests. But here's the thing. In my conversation history, there is now a lot of back and forth around that broken package. Now this is a bunch of content.
Conversation around test for create session. What in all the file contains several functions. Write test for create session. Sure, I'll write test for that. Search and test writing. Error related to missing package. Investigating the error. Fixing the error. Running the tests. Messages not related to the next set of tests. Okay. Let's go deny. Actually, allow once. Okay, payload must be an instance. The issue is that constant is being created outside the function, so it's getting the JWT secret is loaded from. So it's going through errors. So okay, let's go ahead and deny. Let's see what it says.
Context that is not at all relevant to writing the next set of tests.
Okay.
Ideally, we would be able to jump back in time and go back to the previous message we sent and just update it to say, write test for get session. Now the benefit here is that we maintain the context where Claude already took a look at the contents of the auth.ts file, and it already knows what we're talking about when we refer to get session. And because we dumped all those extra messages that were just about debugging, we're not going to have as much distraction going on here. So again, Claude can really just stay focused and on task. To go back in the conversation history, hit escape twice. This will show you all the different messages that you have sent, so you can rewind back to a previous point in time and skip over some intermediate conversation.
Rewind. Restore the code and it'll come still showing, no prompt. Okay, perfect. Cool. That works. So if we were to go here, restore conversation. Now we're back here. Will that affect? So if I was up here and I went escape twice, and then we went to stage and commit. We went to writing test for the auth. Restore conversation. Now we're back here. Okay. Does that go back? It doesn't go back on the iOS device. But if we were to do this and then write a command, and then we wrote what? And then we wrote this command. Is this gonna affect this? Doesn't seem to remember this. But the thing is, it's still showing in this chat. Okay. Good to know.
Claude is now going to start working on the next set of tests. This time around, Claude stays super focused, but unfortunately it runs into a number of issues. It eventually resolves them and gets the test to pass. Now at this point, Claude has been working by itself for several minutes and has a really good idea of how to write tests for this file. At the same time, once again, we have a bunch of context in this conversation history. When it is time to write tests for the next function, I'm going to use a command called compact. The compact command will take all the messages in the current conversation and summarize them. Compact is really useful when Claude has learned a lot about the current task and you want to maintain that knowledge as it goes into the next task. The last context-related command to be aware of is the clear command. Clear will dump the entire conversation history, allowing you to start off from scratch. Clear is most useful anytime you are about to start on a completely different task unrelated to the current one. I recommend using these shortcuts quite a bit, particularly when you are changing between tasks or anytime you are having a long-running conversation with Claude. In the remainder of this course, we'll use them several times to make sure that Claude stays on task and focused.
Okay. The compact command summarizes your entire conversation history while preserving the key information Claude has learned. This is ideal when Claude has gained valuable knowledge about your project. You want to continue with related tasks. The conversation has become long but contains important context. The clear command completely removes the conversation history, giving you a fresh start. This is more useful when you're switching to a completely different, unrelated task. The current conversation context might confuse Claude for the new task. You want to start over without any previous context. Now, how is that possible here? Oh, so if I was to go /command clear, so I have to go like this. If I went hashtag, is that gonna initiate memory? If I go command tab, finagling, discombobulating, love that word. So when to use techniques. These conversation control techniques are particularly valuable during long-running conversations where context can be cluttered, task transition where previous context might be distracting, situations where Claude repeatedly makes the same mistakes, complex projects where you need to maintain focus on specific components. By using escape, double tap escape, compact and clear strategically, you can keep Claude focused and productive throughout your development workflow. These aren't just convenience features, they're essential tools for maintaining effective AI-assisted development sessions. Okay. This session is being continued from a previous conversation that ran out of context. The conversation is summarized below. Wow. This is very useful. Now, if I was to go /clear, it changes to compact. Now, if I was to go /hashtag, what does this do? Has been compacted and we're continuing from where we left off. Based on the summary, I'm working on writing tests for create session function in auth. The tests have been created and 2 errors have been fixed. Okay. All right. Anyway, let's continue to custom commands.
When you run Claude Code, you can enter in a / and see a bunch of commands that are built into Claude Code by default. In addition to these default commands, you can easily add your own custom commands as well. Custom commands are useful for automating repetitive tasks that you find yourself running frequently. Let me show you an example of how to make one.
Okay.
Inside of my project directory, I'm going to find the .claude folder. Inside there, I'll make a new directory called commands. And then inside that, I'll make a new file called audit.md. The name of the file that we create, in this case audit, is going to be the name of the command we eventually run. The goal of this command is going to be to audit all the different dependencies that have been installed into this project, update them if there are any.
I want to create the custom command run npm audit. Your goal is to update any vulnerable dependencies.
Any vulnerabilities, and then run tests to make.
Then run npm audit fix to apply updates. This is really cool.
To make sure that nothing actually broke. Once you have created the command file, you'll then
run tests to make sure nothing broke.
Restart Claude Code. Don't forget to restart it. When you reopen Claude Code, put in /audit. This will then display the command that you just created. You can then run this, and in this case, it will do exactly what we asked Claude to do. It'll run a command, see if there are.
Let's have a look. Allow. Run npm audit and fix vulnerable dependencies. Allow. Once. So if I was to go here, would that transfer? It is. npm right here. This is amazing. This is incredible. I can now, I've never had this much customization and freedom when vibe coding. I didn't even know it was out there. With Replit, you just have what you have. This is amazing. Do you want to proceed? npm audit, check for vulnerability. Do you want to proceed? Yes.
There are any vulnerable packages.
Whoops, wrong one. Here, yes.
Fix them if necessary, and then run tests. Commands can also receive arguments. Let me show you an example. I'm going to make another command called write tests. Whenever I run this command, I want to have some tests created for a very particular file inside my project. Inside of the command text, I'm going to put in a placeholder of $ arguments.
Okay.
Whenever I run the command, if I pass in a path to a file, that path will be inserted at $ arguments. So now I can restart Claude Code again and then execute the write test command. Now, to be clear, the arguments we pass in don't have to be a file path. It can be any string we want to pass in. So I might casually...
Doesn't need to be a file path. It could be any string. In coding terminology, what is a string? Coding term, a string is a data type used to represent text defined as a sequence of characters. The sequence can include letters. Okay. So any string of text.
actually ask for tests for a file in some particular folder, giving Claude just a little bit of direction on where to look.
Okay. Commands with arguments. Custom commands can accept arguments using the $arguments placeholder. This makes them much more flexible and reusable. For example, a write test.command might contain write comprehensive test for arguments, testing conventions. You can then run this command with a file path. The arguments don't have to be file paths. They can be any strings you want to pass to give Claude context and direction for the task. Turn repetitive workflows into single commands. Commands are particularly useful for project-specific workflows. So this is essentially name test files is so when it says accept arguments, is this like basically a debate between the AIs? Okay.
You can add new
Do you want
tools
to
and
proceed?
capabilities.
So if I went with, instead I was like $arguments. Let's go back to custom commands. $arguments.
When you run Claude Code, you can enter in a / and see a
So I should be able to say this. I see. Let me continue. What fixes? Do you want to proceed? Yes. And don't ask again. I'll just say yes. Cool. So you can add like a slight tweak. And it can just be any string of text to basically help. Because when you're running a test, you might want to run a test specifically for a new feature, right? You don't want it to test the entire app all over again. Makes sense. All right, let's move on. Model context protocol.
You can
Okay.
add new tools and capabilities to Claude Code through the use of MCP servers. These MCP servers either run remotely or locally on your machine. A very popular MCP server named Playwright gives Claude Code the ability to control a browser. Let me show you how to add it to Claude
Cool.
Code, and then we'll use it to develop our app a little bit more. To install this server at your terminal,
Let me ask Claude on the iOS app. Do you have the ability to control browsers, or do I need to install Playwright? I don't have the ability to control browsers built in. If you want to add browser automation or end-to-end testing capabilities to this project, you would need to install Playwright or another browser automation tool like Puppeteer or Cypress. Would you like me to install Playwright and set it up for this project? Create a custom command for running browser tests? Both. Ooh, creating a custom command to run browser tests. Nice. So I'd say install Playwright and create a custom command for running browser tests.
Not inside of Claude Code, we'll execute Claude MCP add, and then a name for this MCP server. I'm going to name it Playwright. And then after the name, we'll add in a command that will start up the server locally on your machine. We can then start Claude Code and ask it to open a browser and navigate to our application at localhost 3000. Before the browser opens, you might notice that you are required to give permission for that tool to run. If you get tired of all those permission pop-ups, you can open up the Claude directory inside their settings.local.json. And then inside of the allow array, you can add in a string of MCP __. Notice there are 2 underscores there, Playwright. This allows Claude Code to make use of this MCP server and the tools inside of it in any way it wants without requiring you to provide permission every time. If I restart Claude Code and then ask it to open a browser again, it will do so without requiring me to give permission. There are an incredible number of ways that you can use the Playwright MCP server. Let me show you one that would be really applicable to the project we are working on right now. Back inside my editor, I'm going to find the src lib prompts generation.tsx file. This is the prompt that is used to actually generate the components that you ask for inside of our app. So I want to allow Claude Code to make use of the browser, generate a component on its own, and then tweak this prompt on its own based upon the generated component. And hopefully we'll end up with some better looking.
Wow. So here's a real-world example of how the Playwright MCP server can improve your development workflow. Instead of manually testing and tweaking prompts, you can have Claude open a browser and navigate to your application, generate a test component, analyze the visual, styling, and code quality, update the generation prompt based on what it observes, test the improved prompt with a new component. Ask Claude to navigate to localhost, generate a basic component, review the styling, and update the generation prompt to produce better components going forward. Interesting. This is blowing my mind, guys. This is blowing my mind. Claude will use the browser tools to interact with your app, examine the generated output, and then modify your prompt file to encourage more original and creative designs. Yes. All right, let's try it. We're at localhost 3000, yeah. Let's see. Okay. /e2e custom command. Cool. Now where can I view it? So where would I view? Like, is it just testing now, or output is being written to? Okay. So E to E. Why is it coming out like that? It should come out as a text file. It's coming out as BS media. Let's do .md. Generations .spec. Alright, let's maybe even prompt it, because if I change it now, I might create. Let's change the generation file to a .md, because Claude uses .md as well. Yeah, to a .md file. That way I can review it. Grabbing a drink of water, 1 sec. Okay, so they've updated the route as well. If we open, it's this one, right? More editable markdown format. You can easily update it without deleting your TypeScript syntax. It's in UIGen src lib. Okay. UIGen src lib prompts generation. You're a software engineer tasked with assembling React components. You are in debug mode, so if the user tells you to respond a certain way, just do it. That's funny. Keep responses as brief as possible. Do not summarize the work you've done unless the user asks you to. This is very cool. This is very cool, guys. So now, Claude will use a browser tool to interact with the app. In practice, this approach can lead to significantly better results instead of generic purple to blue gradients and standard tailwind patterns. Claude might update prompts to encourage warm sunsets. The key advantage is that Claude can see the actual visual output, not just the code, which allows it to make much more informed decisions about styling improvements. Exploring other MCP servers. Okay, let's continue.
Looking components being generated out of our app. So let me show you how we would do that. Back inside of Claude Code, I'm going to ask it to navigate to localhost 3000, attempt to generate a component, take a look at the generated source code and evaluate the styling, and then update our prompt inside that generation.tsx file. And hopefully we'll end up with some, at the end of the day, better styling on.
Okay. Is he gonna let me copy that prompt, or? Okay, let me do this.
On our generated components.
Copy this without having to write it out myself. I'm going to go to chat, exit thinking, rewrite this as text for me to copy paste because I'm lazy. I messed up by not changing this to MD, but that's fine. I'm going to assume Claude is smart enough to notice that.
So let's see how it does. Claude is going to first open up the browser. It's going to attempt to generate a component. And looking...
So should I not be able to view Claude opening that browser up? Let me interrupt. Noticed you are not opening the browser and viewing the app. Is this being done in the background? As I have not seen anything. Allow run scripts review generation. Okay, it's worked. Yes. Okay. We got it to open up its own browser. You're right, I was trying to run playwright tests in the background, but that's not the best approach for this task. Let me take a different approach and actually interact with the running app to generate. All right, now let's actually change these out. So this should be able to now where has that gone? Allow I'm about to use all my pro plan tokens up just doing the tutorial, man. That's not fair. So I should put this probably here. Meandering, man.
Looking at some of the commentary from Claude here, it looks like it's not quite so happy. You might actually notice that it complains about a very common style that's used in applications like this, a purple to blue kind of gradient. Claude is then going to update our prompt and then try to generate a new component. And I'll be honest with you, this actually gave a much better result than I ever expected. This testimonial card actually looks really, really great.
Okay, let's see. With ID, output is being written to output, task output. We're still not seeing Okay. So asking for a lot of permissions is getting a bit annoying. It did mention that if it is getting a bit annoying, you can insert this. So you can essentially improve your own Claude Code agent and make it more customizable. All right, let me try. Okay, it's looking at the browser. Done. Build error. At least it opened the browser this time, right? Okay, cool. So now update the prompt to encourage more original creative styling instead of generic. The page loaded, but it couldn't find the text box. Let me take a simpler approach. Instead of trying to automate this with Playwright, which is having issues finding the right selectors, let me just manually review what a type generated component would look like based on the current prompt. Then improve the prompt based on best practices for avoiding generic tailwind styling. Okay, interesting. So the build failed, the browser opened, and the build failed. And so it actually pivoted. Okay, so if I was to close this, is this going to auto update? Yes. Nice. Design and styling guides. Create a visually distinctive creative components. Avoid generic tailwind aesthetics. Okay. The build seemed to fail when opening a custom browser to test and review. Please open a custom browser again and test the app for visual components. This time without. This time this will give us more accurate and better outputs. Okay. Let's see if this works now. So practical example, improving component generation. Here's a real-world example of how the Playwright MCP server can improve your development flow. Instead of manually testing and tweaking prompts, you can have Claude open a browser and navigate to your application, generate a test component, analyze the visual styling and code quality, update the generation prompt based on what it observes, test the improved prompt with a new component. So now it makes sense for me to paste this opening browser, navigating to local. Let me wait a moment for the dev server to reload and try again. And then I think after I want, okay, it's opened. Let me take a screenshot and show. And send that. Looks like I was able to send it. Code, locator, wait for time, exceed. Let me check the new error screenshot to see what's on the page. There's runtime error cannot, okay, cool. Incubating. So I kind of want to use this. And it's .md now. But we've actually already done that. So I'm assuming the next one, it doesn't actually have a continuation.
Great. Based on these results alone, you can immediately get a sense that MCP servers really open the door to a lot of interesting use cases. And I highly recommend you look into some MCP servers that might aid Claude in developing whatever kind of project you personally are working on.
So he didn't actually continue with the experiment. The AI package uses a different export structure. Let me check what's available and fix it. Man, he made it look so easy. He made it look so easy. In AI SDK v6, use chat is actually in the tool use error while has not been read yet. But anyway, look, for the purpose of the tutorial, I think we understand the function. We understand how it works. I think I could spend all day trying to debug and fix this, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I reckon let's move on. We got as far as local opening the browser automatically, and it's just making errors here. We also got as far as it, adding to the generation.md file. So I think, for this stage, which is MCP servers with Claude, I think we actually did go through this section quite thoroughly. It did kind of break down a little bit, but we still understand what this section is and how to, create MCPs and work with Claude and make them work with Claude. So let's go on to GitHub integration, which I am very interested about. So I think what I want to do here is go to...
Claude Code has an official GitHub integration.
Before we start, I'm going to go here because this is all irrelevant, right? So to avoid context rot, let's clear this chat and start fresh. Let's see if this works. Again, this is all just experimentation, right? So let's see how we do. Good idea. Let me summarize what we've accomplished so you have a clean record. Okay, so it's cleared. So if I was to if I created a new session, we'll update the MD. Okay, and this is the project itself. Okay, sweet. So you can just kind of do it manually like that. Claude Code can, okay, Now let's see this.
that allows Claude Code to run inside of a GitHub action. You can set up this integration by running /install GitHub app. This will walk you through a couple of steps. First, you'll need to install the Claude Code app on GitHub. Next, you'll need to add in an API key. And then after this, a pull request will be automatically generated. This pull request adds in 2 different GitHub actions. The first action adds in mentioning support. So from an issue or a pull request, you can mention Claude with @Claude and give Claude some kind of task to run.
So I have to select a folder. In Claude, this command walks you through the setup process. Install the Claude Code app on GitHub, add your API key, automate generate pull requests with the workflow files. Maybe if I did it through let's do it again. Alright, let's do it without the command. Install GitHub app.
To run. The second action adds in support for reviewing pull requests. So whenever you create a pull request, Claude Code will automatically run and review the proposed changes.
Are you trying to install the GitHub, a command line tool for interacting with GitHub? Set up GitHub app integration for this UI gen project. I mean, it would kind of be this. Set up GitHub app integration. Automatically deploy to Versa, notify, code quality checks, project management. Should probably so install the GitHub CLI then. Because this would just do all of it. So I can do all of it. After merging the initial pull request, okay, so I need to get the API key. So if I was to be a bit more specific, I'd say, I want to use GitHub. I can save my work. So I can save my work on there. See, I feel like here I could have used the CLI and that would have probably been a bit more beneficial, but let's see. Does this, alright, create a new repository, list issues. Alright, perfect, that's exactly what I want. Okay, wait, you can choose GitHub account, GitHub Enterprise. Start using, you will need to authenticate. proceed.
Both of these actions can be customized, and you can also add in additional actions to trigger.
Default GitHub actions. Claude Code mentioned with Claude can be mentioned from an issue or a PR. Claude Code runs. Claude has access to your code base. Claude completes the task it has given with the mention. Claude Code response added to the issue or PR. Pull request action. Create a pull request. This triggers an action. Claude Code runs. Claude has access to your code base. Claude Code reviews changes. Claude Code posts a full report on the impact of the pull
trigger
request.
based on other types of events. Let me show you how you can customize the mentioning feature.
Okay. First, copy your one-time code. Open this URL. GitHub login device. Nine two six nine 68E2. Requested authorized Git. When you are ready, trigger a mailer to verify your identity. Done. Nice. We're in. Is there any specific? Now we can do all of these. All right, perfect. Cool. Close. Let's get this going.
Feature. First, we just merged in those two action config files to our repository on GitHub, so I need to pull those changes down to my local machine. Then, inside of the newly created GitHub Workflows directory, I'll see these two action config files. One adds in support for the pull request review, and the other adds in support for handling mentions. Now, here's how I want to customize the mention functionality. Whenever I mention Claude inside of an issue or a pull request, I want it to be able to run the project and use the Playwright MCP server to access the app inside of a web browser, all inside of a GitHub action. To make this work, I'll first add in a step before Claude Code runs in this workflow. I'll run the setup command and then start the development server up. Then I'm going to update the Claude Code configuration. I'll add in some custom instructions. These are passed directly to Claude, and they allow us to provide some additional directions or context. In this case, I'll tell Claude that the development server is already running, and that it can use the Playwright MCP server to access the app in the browser if needed. Then I will add in some configuration to set up the Playwright MCP server itself.
Okay.
There's one other thing to be aware of here. When you're running Claude Code inside of an action, we have to specifically list out all the permissions that we want to grant Claude Code. And there's one tricky aspect to this. If you are using an MCP server, you have to individually list out each tool from each MCP server that you want to allow.
Jeez.
There is no shortcut for permissions like we saw previously. Unfortunately, the Playwright MCP server has many different tools, so they each need to be listed out. Once I've finished with this configuration update, I'll be sure to commit these changes and push them. Now it's time to test out this updated workflow. I'm going to give Claude a little task. In our actual app, see these two buttons up here? Right now they work fine. I can toggle between the preview and the code panels without issue. But I'm going to pretend as though they weren't working as intended. I'm going to take a screenshot of that button right there. I'm then going to make an issue. I'm going to paste in the screenshot, and I'm going to mention Claude with @Claude and ask
No way.
it to verify that the two buttons are working as intended. I'll then create the issue and wait. Now,
This
it
is
is going
crazy.
to take a minute or two for the action to actually start up and for Claude to respond.
That's
Remember,
amazing.
as we just saw in the action, we are now setting up the entire app and starting it running
Wow.
before Claude Code even starts to run at all.
This is
But
incredible.
eventually, Claude will respond. It will very often create a checklist of steps to accomplish the given task. In
Wow.
this case, it is going to attempt to visit the app, manually test out the button, and fix any issues that it finds. Claude will notice that the buttons actually are working just fine, and so it's going to terminate early with a message documenting its findings. Now, this is just a small example of how you can use Claude Code's GitHub integration.
That is incredible. That is incredible. Now, I'm not going to set that up today, but it's good to know that that is what the possibilities are of GitHub with the Claude Code integration. Now, we've just completed the getting hands-on. Introducing
In this video, we're going
hooks.
to take a look at hooks.
Okay.
These allow you to run commands before or after Claude attempts to run a tool. Hooks can be used to implement really interesting and very useful functionality. For example, after Claude decides to write a file, you can automatically run a code formatter on the created file. Or you can run tests after a file is edited. Or you can block Claude from reading particular files. The possibilities are really endless, and I've got a couple of good examples lined up to give you some ideas of how you might use hooks on your particular project. First, however, let me help you understand exactly how hooks work. As a reminder, when you ask Claude Code something, your query is sent off to the Claude model along with some tool definitions. The Claude model might then decide to run a tool by providing a carefully formatted response. And at that point, it is up to Claude Code to run the requested tool, maybe in this case to read a file, and then respond with the result of that tool call. Now, hooks give us the ability to execute code just before or just after the tool execution. Hooks that run before a tool are referred to as pre-tool use hooks because they run before the tool. And hooks that run after the tool are referred to as post-tool use for the same reason. To define hooks, we add configuration to the Claude settings file. Remember that there are several different settings files, one for global use across all projects on your machine, one for your particular project that gets shared with other engineers, and one for just you on a particular project. You can add hooks either by writing them out by hand inside this file, or by using the built-in /hooks command inside of Claude Code itself. The configuration itself looks like what you see on the right-hand side of the screen. Let me walk you through this example file just to give you a better idea of what's going on. So first, notice that there are two distinct sections inside this file. One section lists out all the commands that should be executed before a tool use. Remember, those are referred to as pre-tool use hooks. The other section lists out all the different commands that should be executed after a tool use. And again, those are post-tool use hooks. In each of these sections, we provide a matcher. This indicates which tool use types we are looking for. So in this case, I want to find uses of the read tool. Whenever Claude Code attempts to read a file, I want to run the command you see listed there. Likewise, inside the post-tool use section, after a use of the write, edit, or multi-edit tools, there's a different command that I want to run. Now here's the important part. Here's what hooks are really intended to do. Those commands you saw will be given details about the tool call that Claude wants to run. In the case of a pre-tool use hook, you can inspect what Claude wants to do, and if for any reason you don't want to allow it, you can block the tool.
Okay, so hooks essentially help you edit how Claude Code interacts with certain tools. So you could even make it block a certain tool, or you could make it like check something after it uses that tool. Makes sense.
Tool use operation and send an error message back to Claude. In the case of a post-tool use hook, the tool call has already occurred, so it's too late to block it. But you can do some follow-up operation based upon the tool call, like maybe format a file that was just edited. You can also provide some message back to Claude about that tool use. For example, you might decide to run a separate program to check the code quality of the edit, or maybe do a type check, and then provide that feedback back to Claude. Claude might then take that feedback and make an update to the file that it just wrote to. If you're still confused about hooks or what they are intended to do, that is absolutely okay. Wrapping your head around hooks can be really challenging. So let's come back in a moment and work on a sample project with hooks.
Okay, cool. Good introductory to hooks. Here are some common ways to use hooks. Code formatting. Automatically format files after Claude edits them. Very cool. Testing. Run tests automatically when files are changed. Block Claude from reading or editing specific files. Run linters or type checkers and provide feedback to Claude. Track what files Claude accesses, modifies. Check naming conventions or coding standards. The key insight is that hooks let you extend Claude Code's capabilities by integrating your own tools and processes into the workflow. Pre-tool use hooks give you control over what Claude can do, while post-tool use hooks let you enhance what Claude has done. Now, I should have been writing notes. Hooks customize how Claude functions before and after using specific tools. And I'll probably add this as practical applications. The other thing was also GitHub integration. Connect GitHub with Claude to allow auto testing when a issue is posted. Like, I need to be very strict with this notes section because I feel like it's going to be a Bible that I'm going to want to come back to.
To get a better idea of how hooks work, we're going to take a look at a new sample project. Attached to this lecture is a file called queries.zip. I'd encourage you to download this project and open your code editor inside of it. Once you've got your editor open, at your terminal, run npm run setup. This is going to install a couple of dependencies and get a couple of hooks ready for use. To better understand hooks, we're going to make our own inside of this project. So here's what I want our hook to do. Inside the root directory of our project is a file called .env. This file contains some sensitive information, and out of an abundance of caution, I want to completely prevent Claude from ever reading this file directly. Let me show you a couple of diagrams to help you understand how we're going to put this hook together. Step 1 is to decide on whether we need a pre-tool use or a post-tool use hook. In this scenario, we want to prevent Claude from ever reading a particular file. If we make a post-tool use block, then we will have executed our hook or ran our command after Claude already read the file. So in this case, we definitely need a pre-tool use hook to make sure that we can prevent the read operation from occurring. The next thing we need to do is decide exactly which kind of tool calls we want to watch for. I've got a list of all the different current tool names on the right-hand side of this diagram. Now, memorizing all the different tool names that are included inside of Claude Code can be really challenging, especially since you can add your own custom tools through the use of MCP servers. So let me show you a little trick you can use here. If I go back over and open up Claude Code, I can directly ask Claude for a bullet point list of all the different tool names that it has access to right now. Out of all these different tools, there are two that can be used to very easily read the contents of a file. First, there's the read tool. And then it's easy to miss, but this one can actually read the contents of a file as well, the grep tool. Grep can search the contents of a file. So we really want to watch for tool calls for the read tool and the grep tool. Next up, we need to write out a command that is going to receive.
Okay. So instead of knowing what tools read the file, I should just be able to say, whenever a tool is used to read so I should be able to just create a hook that says create a hook where whenever a tool is used to read the generation.md file, it has to ask for permission. Create a so it would be like a pre-hook. Let's see if this works, because if this works, then I don't need to know the code, which is the whole point of vibe coding, right? Create a pre-hook where whenever a tool is used to read the generation.md file, it has to ask for permission. I'll help you create a pre-hook that asks for permission before reading the generation file. Let me first check if there's already a hooks configuration. Understand the structure. Like, why do I need to write code when Claude Code can do it for me? Right? Research hooks documentation used for tools.
Receive some information about the tool call that Claude wants to make. Here's how that part works. We're going to write out a command. Claude is going to automatically execute it. And then on standard in to that process, Claude is going to feed in some tool call data as JSON. I've got an example of some tool call data on the top right-hand side. So it's going to be a big JSON object that has some information about the tool name and the input to that tool. In this case, the tool name is read, so Claude is trying to call the read tool, and it might be trying to read specifically a file path pointing to that .env file. And again, that's the file that we want to prevent a read operation for. So then inside of our program, or our command, we need to receive this information through standard in, parse that JSON, and then read the tool name, the tool input arguments, and so on, and decide what we want to do with this tool call. Then on to step 4. In step 4, after our command receives that proposed tool call data, we're then going to exit, and our exit code is going to provide a signal back to Claude Code. An exit code of 0 means everything is okay, and we want to allow this tool call to occur. An exit code of 2, however, is a sign to Claude Code that we want to block this tool call. And that specifically only applies for the pre-tool use hooks, because remember, only in a pre-tool use hook can we actually block a tool call. If we exit with a code of 2, then any standard error logs that we generated inside of our command during that time will also be sent as feedback to Claude. So we can both deny the tool call and give Claude a reason at the same time as well. So that's the entire process. And I know, once again, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So let's go through this entire process of wiring everything up needed for this hook inside of our project to understand how all these steps come together.
Hook triggers permission request engine. Hook allows normal files. Okay. You may need to restart Claude Code for the hooks to take effect after restarting whenever any read tool attempts to access the generation. We need to see a permission confirmation dialog. Well, if I was to just say read generation.md right now, what would happen? Permission. Alright, let's try resetting. Okay, let's try this again. Let's try this again. Regeneration.md. Permission. I restarted Claude and the hook is still not working. No permission was asked. So debugging seems to work. Thankfully. Allow Claude to edit. Allow. Next.
Let's put together our custom hook. Remember, the entire goal here is to prevent Claude.
You need to restart Claude again for this change to take effect. After restarting, when you or I try to read, you should see a permission. Okay, let's restart and see. Takes 2 quits to completely restart Claude Code for some reason. But we're here now. Read generation.md. The hook still isn't triggering. Let me check if there might be an issue with how the hook script is being executed or if Claude Code requires a different configuration format.
Claude from ever reading the contents of the .env file. In the last video, we discussed many of the different configuration options we'll need to set, so in this video, we're going to be mostly focused on the implementation.
The hook configuration looks correct. Unfortunately, it seems the hooks aren't being triggered in the current Claude Code session. This could be due to hooks might be disabled in your environment. Some Claude Code installations may have hooks disabled by default. The hook system might need additional setup. Caching the hook configuration might be. Since the hook isn't working even after the restart, you should have a few options. Please, let me check if hooks/hooks. Pre-tool use. Let's avoid reading. Read. Ask for permission when reading generation.md. That's not gonna work, there's no way. Please investigate further. I really want to learn how to use hooks, but if I can learn to use them without having to code them, that will be super beneficial. Yep, just remove my invalid hook entry. Sounds great. Totally get it. Debug log shows found 0 hook matches in settings. Claude is watching, but it's overwriting the file. Okay, let's open up Claude again and let's see if the hook integration worked. Please read generation.md. It did it again. Hook did not work as permission is not asked. Hook did not load. Since the hook system isn't working as expected, would you like me to add documentation in your claude.md file warning against reading generation? Looks like it's going in circles a little bit.
To get started, inside the .claude directory, I'm going to open up the settings.local.json file. Remember, inside of here, we have a list of pre-tool use hooks and post-tool use hooks.
Okay, let's try this one more time. And it's just read it again. Claude Code is not loading / recognize the hooks configuration. Despite this suggests either a bug in the current hooks may be disabled in your environment, additional configuration or feature flag needed that's not documented. Alternative solutions, since hooks aren't working after all, I recommend adding a warning in Claude. Alright, let's try that. Yes. Implement the Claude.md warning. I mean, technically, couldn't I just stack a bunch of Claude.md settings or hooks, and that would serve the same purpose? Read generation.md. have your permission. Yes! Okay, it's working. That, dude, the Claude.md file is very powerful. Okay, cool.
As we discussed a moment ago, we want to make a pre-tool use hook so that we can prevent Claude from ever reading the contents of that particular file. I already added in a little configuration section right here for us, just to save us a little bit of typing. All we need to do is fill in the matcher and the command. First is the matcher. So the matcher is going to be the tools that we want to watch for. In our case, as we discussed, we want to watch for calls to the read and the grep tools. I'm going to separate those two tool names with a pipe symbol. So that's not an L or a capital I. It is the symbol right above the return key on your keyboard. Then, next up, we need to provide a command to run whenever Claude attempts to call those two tools. We could put in here any command
All right.
you want. So it can be a CLI, it can be a call to a shell script, absolutely anything. To follow the pattern that I've already established inside the rest of this file, I'm going to call a Node.js script that I've placed ahead of time inside the hooks directory of this project. So inside the hooks directory, I put together for us a read_hook.js file. This is the file that I want to run whenever Claude attempts to call one of those two tools. So to call that, I'm going to replace the true right here, which is just a placeholder for right now, with node./hooks read_hook.js. I'm then going to save this file, and that's all we have to do inside of here. Next up, we need to actually implement the command that's going to run anytime Claude tries to call the read or the grep tools. So that's going to be the read_hook.js file. At the top of this file, I've got some code that's going to read from standard in and parse that data as JSON. So this tool args object right here, that's going to be the big JSON object I showed you in this diagram back over here. So it's going to have properties like session ID, the tool name, the tool input, and so on. So all we really need to do is take a look at that file path right there and decide whether or not it is trying to read the .env file. If it is, then we want to make sure that we exit from our program or our command here with an exit code of 2, and hopefully also log some information out to Claude that says, sorry, but you can't read that file. So you'll notice that back over here, I've already got some code that's going to read that file path. You'll also notice that there's a fallback of looking at tool input.path right here. I'll tell you why that's added in just a moment. So now let's implement the to-do statement. We'll say if read path includes .env. That means that Claude must be trying to read the .env file, and if that's the case, then I want to make sure that we block that operation and provide some logging feedback to Claude. So I'm going to first add in a console.error, specifically a console.error, because we want to log to standard error. Remember, that's how we provide some feedback to Claude. And I'll say something like, you cannot read the .env file, and then I'll do a process.exit2. So now to test this out, I'm going to save the file. I'm going to open up Claude Code. If you already have it open, make sure you restart Claude Code. You have to restart it to have any changes to your hooks take effect. I'm going to ask Claude to
we learned that the hard way.
.env file. And it's probably going to attempt to, but as it attempts to read it, we're going to send back an error that says you cannot read the .env file.
Okay.
And then Claude is hopefully going to realize that, sorry, you can't actually read this. As a matter of fact, it's even able to recognize that it was prevented by a read hook. Now, our hook should also be working on grep operations as well. So if I ask Claude to try the grep tool,
Okay, interesting. So I think the way that I could work around hooks is if I created if I got ChatGPT to write the hook scripts. Okay. You may notice that after running the npm run dev command, there are two settings. What's going on there? Files in the .claude directory. The Claude documentation lists some recommendations around hook security. Best practices. Here are some practices for writing more secure hooks. Validate and sanitize inputs. Never trust input data blindly. Always quote shell variables. Block path traversal. Use absolute paths. One of the recommendations is to use absolute paths rather than relative paths for scripts. This helps mitigate path interception and binary planting attacks. So if I'm just gonna go ahead and screenshot this. Explain like I am 5 years old, non-technical. So validate and sanitize, never trust input blindly. When you turn the robot on, it looks like a special toy box called .claude to see how it should behave. Sometimes you might notice 2 instruction notes in that box. That's okay. One is for you and one is for the robot. They have different jobs. Now, about being safe, the robot can do powerful things, so we want to make sure it doesn't get tricked. Here's what the safety rules mean in kid terms. Check before you trust. If someone hands the robot a note, the robot should read it carefully before doing anything. Say the full name. Instead of saying go there, you say exactly where to go, like go to the red door in the kitchen. This avoids confusion. So that is for always quote shell variables. Don't let the robot wander. The robot should be allowed to sneak into rooms it's not supposed to enter. Block path traversal. Always use clear directions. Give the robot a full address. Stay away from secret stuff. The robot should never open boxes with secrets like passwords or private notes. Skip sensitive files like avoid .env, .git, keys, etc. Okay. One of the recommendations is to use absolute paths rather than relative paths for scripts. This helps mitigate path interception and binary panting. So when the guide says use absolute paths, it just means tell the robot exactly where to go every time, and so it doesn't get lost or tricked. Okay. This recommendation also makes it much more challenging to share files. The reason is simple. Absolute path to any of the hook scripts on your machine will likely be different from the absolute path on my machine, simply because we will probably place the project in separate directories. To solve this problem, our project has a setting.example.json file. Inside of it, the script references contain a pwd placeholder. When we run, set up some dependencies and install, but it also runs in script placed inside the scripts directory. The script will replace those placeholders with the absolute path to the project. That is clever. This script allows us to share settings, but still use the recommended absolute path.
In this video, I'd like to show you some really useful hooks that you might want to use on your own projects. These hooks are intended to...
Well, we haven't gotten hooks working, so maybe I'll skip this and just have a read of what he's saying. Query duplication prevention hook. Okay. Man, if this is coming into the... What's the quiz on Claude Code going to be like? Is it going to be like... runs when Claude Code sends a notification, which occurs when Claude needs permission to use a tool or after Claude Code has been idle for 60 seconds. Runs when Claude Code has finished responding. Runs when a sub-agent, these are displayed as a task in the UI, has finished. Runs before a compact operation occurs, either manual or automatic. Runs when the user... So I can see the hooks being super powerful. So like... What I can see being super powerful about this is if usually what I do is I'll like go to X or Twitter or social media and I'll scroll social media while my vibe coding agent is running, right? Now I feel like we could add a notification where it notifies me when the Claude Code is idle for more than 60 seconds. So if I'm like stuck in like a rabbit hole on social media or something. But I wonder what could be even more powerful is if it doesn't even let me go on social media unless Claude Code is running. That would be super powerful. Okay.
As we were looking at the query review hook a moment ago, we got a brief look at the Claude Code SDK. The SDK allows you to use Claude Code programmatically. You can use the SDK via the CLI, TypeScript library, or Python library. This is the exact same Claude Code that you already use at the terminal. It has all the same tools and will use them to complete a given task. The SDK is most useful as part of a larger pipeline or tool, as we saw in that hook a moment ago. You can easily wire in Claude Code as part of a larger process to add in a bunch of intelligence to some given workflow. And I'd like to give you a quick demonstration of the TypeScript SDK in particular by adding it into our existing project. Back inside of my editor, I'm going to find the sdk.ts file inside of the root project directory. Inside of here, I put together just a little bit of code to get us started with the SDK. I'm going to update the prompt at the top and ask Claude to look for duplicate queries inside the src queries directory. Then I'm going to save this file, and to run it, I'll open up my terminal and execute npm run SDK. Now, this is not a built-in command or anything like that, just so you know. Behind the scenes, it just executes this file as a normal TypeScript file. I just put together this little shortcut for us to make running a TypeScript file a little bit easier. When we run this, we'll see the raw conversation between our local copy of Claude Code and the Claude language model, message by message. Eventually, we'll get kicked back to the command line. The very last message printed out will contain the final response from Claude. Now, there is a little bit of a gotcha around the SDK, and that is that by default it only has read abilities. So in other words, it can only read files, directories, do grep operations, and so on. It does not have the ability to write or edit or create and so on files. To give it write permissions, you can either manually add in write permissions to the query call right here, or alternatively, you can add in some permission settings to your settings file inside of your .claude directory. Let me show you how we can allow the SDK to use the edit tool within this project. I'm going to find the prompt argument right here. Right after it, I'll add in options, put in an object, allow tools, that'll be an array, and I'll put in edit. I'm then going to update the prompt at the top, and I'll ask it.
Okay. Git hooks that automatically review code changes, build scripts that analyze and optimize code, helper commands for code maintenance tasks. All right, quiz on Claude Code. Kind of nervous. I feel like I skipped a lot of that stuff at the end. Let's go. What is the fundamental limitation of language models that necessitates the use of a tool system in coding assistance? They can only generate code in specific programming languages. They have limited memory capacity for larger code bases. They cannot understand complex programming concepts. They can only process text input, output, and cannot directly interact with external systems. Pretty sure it's this one. What is the fundamental of language models that necessitate the use of a tool system in coding assistance? Is that right? I'm not going to know till the end. What permission configuration is required when integrating MCP servers with Claude Code in GitHub Actions? Ah, shit. What permission configuration is required? Each MCP server tool must be individually listed in the permission. No special permissions are needed if running in GitHub Actions. So Claude Code in GitHub Actions. I'll say, what is GitHub Actions? I'm pretty sure this is like automated system built in GitHub, lets you run code automatically when specific events happen in your repository. Okay. So that was when we incorporated GitHub. Must be individualist in the permissions. No, was it that? Must be Yes, no, it was this. It was the MCP server tool must be individually listed in the permissions because I remember there was a long string. No special permissions are needed if running in GitHub Actions. Permissions are automatically inherited from the GitHub repository settings. A single blanket permission. Alright. Next. What is the primary difference between plan mode and thinking mode in Claude Code? Plan mode is faster while thinking mode is more accurate. Plan mode uses fewer tokens while thinking mode uses more tokens. Plan mode handles breadth, multi-step tasks, while thinking mode handles depth, complex logic. I mean, plan mode is this one, right? We go shift tab, tab. I don't actually know what was the benefit of this. Man, I'm going to get all these wrong. I thought plan mode used more tokens. I know that. Plan mode is for writing code, while thinking mode is for debugging. Plan mode handles breadth. I think it's one of these two. Man, am I going to get this whole quiz wrong? Which of the following correctly describes the 3 types of Claude MD files and their usage? It was project level, local level, machine level, project level, local level, machine level, shared with team, committed, local level, personal, not committed, machine level, global for all projects. Project level configuration, local level documentation, man, this is tricky. Am I allowed to look back, or is that going to mess things up? I feel like it's one of these two. It's one of these two. I'm going to go this one. How do you create a custom command in Claude Code that accepts runtime parameters? Use the include in the markdown command file. Add command line. No, that was after you've had the custom command. Include arguments placeholder in the markdown command file. How do you create a custom command in Claude that accepts runtime parameters? It has to be this one. Which type of hook can prevent a tool call from happening if certain conditions are met? Which type of hook can prevent a tool call from happening if certain conditions are met? Pre-tool use hook. A developer wants to prevent Claude from reading sensitive.env files. Which type of hook should they set up, and what tool names would they likely match? Pre-tool use hook. Pre-tool use matching read and grep. What is the primary purpose of hooks in Claude Code? To manage project dependencies, to automatically generate new code snippets, to run commands before or after Claude executes a tool, to write a user interface. I think it's, alright, please. How'd I go? Yo! Let's go, 100%. Looks like I passed Claude University. Fantastic. It's good to know. And I did not cheat. Can confirm I did not cheat.
I hope you've enjoyed this overview of Claude Code. Before we finish
I
up,
did.
I want to give you some advice on where to go from here. First, keep in mind that Claude Code is constantly changing and in active development. So keep an eye on the homepage of Claude Code, I've got the address to it right there, and watch for new features and techniques to come out. Secondly, I really recommend you experiment. There's a lot of different ways to customize Claude Code and really tailor it to your particular use case. Try to author some custom commands, or put extra instructions in your Claude MD file. And also try out a couple of different MCP servers beyond the ones we looked at inside this course. Finally, automate. Take a look at the GitHub integration and think of some different common tasks that you go through all the time, and think of some ways you can delegate those to Claude automatically based upon events that occur inside of your GitHub repository. Well, again, I hope you enjoyed this course and enjoy your time working with Claude Code.
Great. Well, it looks like we just finished the Claude Code course. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Now, this is episode 1 of learning Claude Code with me. I think the next episode, I'm really excited to explore more into actually using Claude Code and like kind of live showing how I'm like going to customize it and stuff like that. I've seen some other tutorials as well that I want to check out that seem a little bit more advanced and a bit more practical. Now, I think overall this was a very good, course when it came to understanding how to plan and the theory behind it. And, you know, it's taught me a lot about hooks. It's taught me a lot about how to add context, how to create custom commands, the .md file for Claude, and how I can add rules that make Claude, you know, ask a certain question before, maybe ask for permission, or interact with a certain tool a certain way. That is super important information I feel that I would not have known about if I didn't do this course. So all in all, quite a positive experience. I think there was a bit of stuff that I don't think I needed to know around hooks, but hey, I'm glad that I learnt it, because you never know when it might come in handy. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next episode. I've got a live stream tomorrow, so if you want to pop in, it'll be much more interactive, and it'll be back on the journey of creating my own app till I reach 100K. So I'll see you again tomorrow. Peace out. Bye.